Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Dick. We are the Annuity Guys.
Dick, today we're talking about the two most confused annuities for each other.
Well, it's
although
true.
They don't work anything like each other.
I know, but they sound like each other.
Well, and they're often confused because of either how they're described.
Right, exactly. So what we're talking about, variable annuities versus fixed indexed annuities,
Right.
and they both deal with securities terms.
Terms is the key word there.
Exactly. Where when we start talking about the fixed indexed annuity, we're talking about very popular indexes, like
S&P 500.
Right, the Dow Jones,
yeah.
and a lot of these new indexes that have been created for them that obviously have connotations of securities.
So, but we're talking about connotations of securities, but so we're saying you're in an index like the S&P 500, but you're not in the index?
Well, that's exactly true. You're just benchmarked to it. So it's a way that the insurance companies can actually pay you more interest based on the performance of an index, because they're actually using that index in most cases by purchasing options with that index or into that index, so that you're not actually invested in it, in the index itself.
So the easy way to say this, I guess, is with the indexed annuity, you're using the index as a benchmark. It's not that your dollars are actually in the index.
Correct.
And with then the variable annuities, your dollars are actually in sub-accounts.
Yes, they're in securities.
So they're actually in sub-accounts, for the best way of describing it, is usually mutual funds that track basically individual money managers. They can be stock funds, bond funds, whatever the like may be, but they're actually invested in those mutual funds.
Right, and this is where we begin to talk about some substantial differences between the fixed indexed annuity and the variable annuity, and the big difference is the investment risk.
Yeah. So unfortunately, when it comes to the variable annuity, you're taking on the investment risk as the owner of the annuity, because you're going to have the ups and the downs of the actual market.
Right.
Now with the fixed index annuity, you're actually just subject to really the upside.
Right.
Because
right.
What the index annuity is, it has some criteria that makes it a fixed index annuity.
Yes.
And the fixed portion basically says that you're not going to lose anything.
Right, there's some minimum guarantees built into this that
Because-
you can't go backwards necessarily from any type of investment risk.
Right. And so now, where are you going to find out about these indexed annuities or these variable annuities? How are you getting, why is there confusion? Who's selling them?
Well, and you're hitting on a very key point, because variable annuities, if you go out into the marketing world and you look at variable annuities, well, there's a lot more variable annuities that are sold or have been sold in the past than the fixed indexed annuities, and part of that is the wide distribution. All of the securities guys, the broker dealers, registered representatives, many times that's their only choice of an annuity that they can offer. They have very limited fixed annuity or fixed indexed annuity choices. So distribution plays a big part of it, but fixed indexed annuities have become very popular recently, and not just so recently, maybe in the last 10 years they've become extremely popular, and they've really started in many ways to overtake the variable annuity, and certainly in sales.
Even in the distribution channels.
Yes.
The guy that used to be just to be able to offer you a variable annuity, now all of a sudden is starting to say, hey, these indexed annuities may not be such a bad thing, and they're starting to see more and more exposure in those same types of channels.
It's funny how we saw that many years ago.
If only they would have been watching us.
Exactly. But let's just touch on some of the reasons why fixed indexed annuities have been so popular, Eric.
First and foremost has got to be the guarantees, right?
I absolutely agree.
Because when somebody's usually buying an annuity, it's for the guarantees. Now, to conversely say that with the variable annuity, it's usually you're getting a minimal guarantee, usually if you purchase an additional rider, and that's usually the same true of an index annuity.
Yes.
So, but because of the risk that the insurance company has to take, they're able to offer you a better guarantee, usually on an index annuity, than they can on a variable annuity.
Right, because they've got more on reserve and they've got less volatility in those investments than the sub-accounts.
Yeah, I think the volatility is the key aspect there. And so when you're trying to trade off that risk-reward, what's more important to you on the annuity? Is it having the uncapped upside potential, or the best guarantee for future income in the pay.
Exactly. Then we get into, Eric, another major downfall, I would say, of the variable annuity is the fees. They're very high. Yes.
And that's one of the challenges that I think most people have if you're out there on the internet, and you obviously are because you're
Right.
watching us here, it's knowing that the fees on a variable annuity are typically 3 to 5%. And I say typically. There are some out there that are starting to become available on the advisory channel. They're much lower, and in fact, can be based off of just advisory costs.
Sure.
But for the most part, because of the risk and the reward aspect, you're going to be in that 3 to 5% range. Well, and the challenge here becomes now, when you start taking income, so if you're taking out 5%, and the insurance company's taking out 5%,
Yeah, you have to have a pretty high return
in order just to maintain,
just to break even.
and I see a lot of people being sold an annuity
Right.
on the potential of increasing income based off of great market performance.
Right. And Eric, if we contrast those fees of 3 to 5% that we're talking about on the variable annuities to a more typical fee of around 1%, that's with a good income rider on a fixed indexed annuity. And if you don't want an income rider, you have no fees.
Right.
And so, this is very appealing to folks who really want to get a reasonable rate of growth, on their annuity. Without the risk.
Yeah, and you're not going to have the volatility. You're not going to have the movement up and down. You're going to have much more of a consistent kind of volatility-controlled growth.
Right.
It's not the boom and bust that you are with some of the other variable products. So what they're looking at there is predictability
Right.
and being able to give you the best upside and the guarantees typically associated.
Right. Eric, we've, kind of extolled a little bit, on the FIAs, the fixed indexed annuities, but the variable annuities have some reasons why people really do choose a variable annuity over a fixed indexed annuity, and we've already touched a little bit on some of this, but one of them is that upside.
Well, and then there's no cap. I mean, a lot
Right.
of times when you hear fixed indexed annuity, there's some aspect
A limiting factor.
limiting upside, whether it be
Right.
the index itself, rather than be a cap or a participation rate, something that says, hey, you're not going to get 100% of the growth in this index.
And the variable annuity doesn't do that except for recently.
That's right. Now we're starting to see the gradual coming home of the variable annuity back to the end. It's funny how innovation happens.
Right.
Yeah, we used to say the unlimited upside is what the key is on the variable. Well, now we're starting to see a variable annuity and those introduced with limited upside
And
potential.
some limited downside.
So they're trying to
Right.
squeeze the spread
so
one
you
way.
still have investment risk in the
That's
middle
right.
somewhere.
Yeah, you might get 20% on the upside and only
Exactly.
10% loss on the
Exactly.
downside. So it's this whole melting pot of innovation and trying to figure out what works for an individual.
Another thing that I think we can give to the variable annuity is that if we really felt we were going to be in an up market for a long extended period of time, it's going to outperform
Oh, sure.
the fixed indexed annuity.
Yeah, it's as we said, the boom and bust aspect. You're
Right.
anytime you can say unlimited upside, you would perceive to have more growth. Now,
Right.
If we went back 15 years or so, or even longer, I would have told you the unlimited upside was a lot more unlimited. What we're starting to see as some of these variable annuity companies start to, I say, de-risk the products,
Right.
they're restricting allocation proportions.
So now you don't have the choices.
So you can't be 100% all equity.
In the sub-accounts,
No,
right.
you have to, if you're going to be in the investments,
Yes.
you might have to have more bond allocations and those things that are part of your requirements
Right.
as you're making those choices.
Yeah, I think that as we, talk about that unlimited upside, we have to always balance that with the unlimited downside.
Right. With the caveat there of
Yes.
depending on which variable.
Right, and the fees that the higher fees when you're going down in a variable annuity, if you're in a down period, those high fees really magnify and exaggerate your losses.
Yeah, and I would often say that if you're looking at a variable, that's where that rider comes into play, and you're paying an additional fee even for the rider, but that's what's protecting your lifetime
Right.
income. So the other aspect of the variable annuity, and what both of these have, and one of the reasons they're bought, is for tax deferral.
Yes.
And so we should probably mention that that's one of the similarities that both of them have.
Right,
They
that
can both be
commonality.
used, for
Right.
tax deferral aspects. And you'll see a lot of times people, depending on what their goals are, might even transfer from one product to the other to basically look at either the guarantees, if you're looking for
Right.
the income guarantees, versus looking for just tax deferral
Right.
and growth.
Eric, I think in fairness, I would really kind of sum this up by saying that for those folks that, want to have a foot in that risk and reward securities market and maybe have a little bit of a buffer with some of the guarantees that a variable can offer, they might like that. But I think for those retirees, those people that are trying to set up a retirement where they can sleep well at night,
Yeah.
I think the fixed indexed annuity that's why it's gained so much popularity.
I would agree.